Hello everyone, welcome to From the Star Wars Library, where Star Wars is in print, the Force is with the readers, and we return to the newspaper strips in 1981 for the Serpent Masters. I'm your host, Nathan P. Butler. The Serpent Masters picks up where Darth Vader Strikes leaves off, which means, if you're one of those hardcore collectors and have that Russ Cochran set, it's in Volume 1 for pages 91 to page 131. Now, if you're a modern reader, you're probably going to catch these in the pages of classic Star Wars. They are all in that In Deadly Pursuit first volume of the trade paperback series, or in the spread out pages, of three different issues here. The thing about it, of course, is that, again, they're not running these by storyline. They're just running the stories as far as they can go in one issue and moving on to the next. So, again, we get sort of a partial issue, a whole issue of this story, the Serpent Masters, and then another partial issue here. Now, the original strips ran from July 27th through November 1st of 1981. Now, in the 1992 issue number 4, you'll find this storyline beginning right there, basically in the next panel after we see the drone barge fly off on page 11. This is some new material here, so it kind of depends on your way of looking at it. Either the new material is what demarks the beginning of the new story, or that's a continuation of this, and we can say that the new story actually begins on page 12. Again, it very much just depends really on what perspective you want to take with this whole thing. Personally, I like to be able to match it up with the comic panel that it's from the newspaper strip, so I would say this right here is the start of it. But again, your mileage will vary on this. Not even on a droid barge. Bad pun there. We also have issue number 5, in which it appears, also from 1992. And then moving us into the beginning of 1993, we have issue number 6. But again, it's not going to go all the way through issue number 6. Instead, it really only goes through about page 5. But again, we have some panels that appear in the newspaper strips, but then there's some new material here, and really a new page on the other side of it that winds up getting us to the point where we can see the next storyline starting the way the newspaper strips ran. The newspaper strips just kind of run into each other, bumper to bumper, without having much of a transition in between. They've created the transition here so it can run somewhat smoothly as an individual comic issue as part of this broader 20-issue series. This story takes place mostly on the planet Ophidoran. Basically, Luke and Tanith and the two droids have escaped Fondor, where they were trying to sabotage the Executor and all of that as part of that plot where Admiral Griff was trying to work with Vader to root out Imperial conspirators and whatnot. They've escaped on this drone barge. The thing about it, though, is that the droid barge isn't going where it's supposed to go. Tanith has been sabotaging these things. She's a starship thief, basically, and she's sending it on a collision course with that planet that is ruled by the so-called Serpent Masters. She's delivering them. Basically, at one point, her people's starship crashed on the planet, and the Serpent Masters managed to enslave them. And she has one chance, she thinks, of getting them their freedom, and that is to go back out into the galaxy, working for them, capture as many drone barges and such as they can, send them down there so they can be scavenged and salvaged by the Serpent Masters to eventually buy the freedom of her people. She's usually sending these drone barges, though, on their way without needing to worry about anybody being alive on them because they are drones. Now we start out with the problem of, oh crap, they're going to run out of air because they're not meant to hold people. Fortunately, rather than going to its regular destination, it goes to the planet of the Serpent Masters. That's a little bit closer. They don't run out of air, but they crash into it. So they have to use this essentially fireproofing foam to save themselves when the ship finally crashes. They wind up then being captured or taken in by the Serpent Masters. Luke winds up being essentially a slave at first. Tanith is somewhat of a slave already. She's someone that the Serpent Master leader, Tyran, actually really wants to be with. So he's trying to impress her, treats her a little bit better. They wind up essentially being laborers for him. But the droids, they're in for a worse fate. They're taken away to eventually be dismantled. Fortunately, they never get that far in the dismantling. Luke is able to rescue them. Why do they call them the Serpent Masters? Really what you got here is sort of like the Wind Raiders of Talaran type of thing in a lot of ways, except this time it's serpents. There are these flying snake-type serpents that are native to the planet that the Serpent Masters are riding. They're also wearing all this like cast-off gear. So you got some of these really cool images or really cool imagery. For instance, where you have, I believe it's in issue number 4, I picked up 6 there, of people in stormtrooper uniforms or armor flying these serpents. Because, again, they take whatever gear they can find, and apparently there must have been some Imperial gear that wound up on the planet. And while flying these things, it looks easy. When it turns out that they're the only ones who can control it, and Luke can't figure out why. It's apparently not the Force, because he has the Force, still can't ride them correctly. Eventually, he finds R2-D2 and C-3PO, they reveal that they have picked up this like ultrasonic frequency that's out there, and that's what's controlling the serpents. R2-D2 is able to recreate that, letting Luke get a hold of one of the serpents and ride it, which is kind of a cool feat to see him doing here. Now, before we get too far into this, let me point out one thing that stands out from these issues. I'm trying to look for a good image of this. Yeah, that's not too bad. I guess the first page of issue 5. The character's name is Tyran, the man who leads them, and kind of a very distinctive Persian or Arabic look to the clothing. Definitely a Middle Eastern influence here, plus the name Tyran, like tyrant, kind of like Iran, kind of like Tehran. So it seems like there was at least a cultural influence in this. Remember, this is being written in the early 80s. There were already those issues going on over in Iran, so it sort of makes sense for that to be in the public consciousness. Just like now, we see certain influences in, say, the Clone Wars dealing with terrorism, because that is a modern mindset after the 9/11 attacks in 2001. Suffice to say, Tehran has been wearing this little medallion here. He's got his own bling, so to speak. And unfortunately for him, his medallion, his bling, is cut off by Luke. It goes falling. He tries to dive after it. It's what's been controlling the ultrasonic frequencies. Without it, the serpents go mad, except the ones controlled by Luke, and the Serpent Masters are defeated. Now, hopefully, the people who have been enslaved can use the serpents to be able to save themselves, and maybe at some point get to the ship the Serpent Masters had to get them off the planet and back home safely. So it's sort of a happy ending for Tanith's people. We will see them leave, but Tanith will wind up going with Luke, at least for a little while longer, which is kind of cool. We also see here, within the span of this particular tale, we see Han and Leia briefly share another brief kiss, though it seems like it's more of Han saying, I'm going to show you what you're missing kind of kiss, rather than something that Leia is actually asking for. So again, the Marvel series does it, this series does it. It's not something that's new when it happens in The Empire Strikes Back. It's just the first time we saw it on film. But chronologically, it's happened before, just generally with sort of an iffy amount of consent involved, which is just a tad creepy. So, this story, The Serpent Masters, is it an essential read? I would say no. There's nothing in this that's necessary for the broader Star Wars saga. Now, you should read this if you read Darth Vader Strike, because it's a direct continuation. You want to see what happens to those characters. But big, grand scheme of things, no, it is not a necessary tale. Just another solid adventure in the Goodwin-Williamson era of this series. We'll find that this is the era in which the stories are more serious, more interesting, better drawn, and better played out, as opposed to the Manning/Hoberg/ Archie Goodwin writing under a pseudonym or as an adapter of somebody else's work type of era. Once we got to 81, things started getting better with this series, and will continue to do so. Although there is some hiccups from time to time, like an actor who's able to portray Ben Kenobi so well that Luke doesn't recognize him. But that's another story coming up in a future episode. For now, let's wrap up this episode. Thank you for watching, and may the Force be with the readers.